U.S. President Joe Biden has spoken with Morocco's King Mohammed VI on Monday to offer his condolences following the devastating earthquake that hit the North African country earlier this month. The two leaders discussed Washington's readiness to assist in recovery efforts. Ali Khan Satchu, who is the founder and CEO of Rich Management, joins us now to discuss. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us on the exchange. So, beginning with Libya's, floods, the disaster there, one of the deadliest storms on record. What, in your view, are the implications, on Libya and I guess, the economies that are surrounding the surrounding area?
So first of all, I would say, Libya is a special case. We had the NATO intervention in 2011, which I think is the original sin, and the spillover effect from that intervention has affected the Sahel, and Libya has not really stabilized since that time. You've had these bursts of economic growth and then slumps. So it's been a very difficult situation for more than a decade. The region, the Mediterranean basin, I'm sure you've noticed, has been suffering tremendous climate volatility. We saw the fires in Greece. We saw extreme heat along the southern European belt. And now we've seen these floods in Libya. So the weather system affecting that region has become very, very extreme. Libya's economy is about $50 billion in terms of total GDP. It was, of course, the richest on a per capita GDP basis during the Gaddafi era, but certainly isn't now. I think, the oil and gas story is a very strong tailwind at the moment. Oil prices are going up towards $100. The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia and President of Russia have wrestled the price control away from Biden. And they seem determined to take it into triple digits. So, look, it's a positive macro environment, but obviously my condolences to all those who lost their lives in this tragic situation. They just don't have a proper government, right? So there were warning signs that were not heeded, and this is what essentially happens in this sort of scenario.
Now, it's interesting you mentioned the climate aspect of this, because the United Nations General Assembly kicks off, and we've already seen climate activists, protesting and so on and so forth. Does this accelerate the, energy transition discussion in a nation like Libya that is fossil fuel dependent? You already mentioned oil prices on the rise. Does this in any way accelerate that at all?
I don't think so. I think, with Libya, in Libya's case, clearly it's an oil and gas powerhouse. Libyan oil is very sweet crude. It's sought after by most refiners, particularly in Europe. But of course, there is a bigger story for Africa in terms of renewables and the energy transition. It's a no-brainer. Solar energy, for example, given the amount of sun we have on the continent, and Libya is no different. So there's potential there. But I think what Libya is trying to do is recover its position that it was in before that 2011 intervention, get its exports back, get a unified and stable government structure in place. You got a lot of folks who are intervening in Libya, from the UAE to Turkey, and somehow Libya's got to find some stability. But I think it remains a fossil fuel story for now.
Yeah, you mentioned Turkey. They had that terrible earthquake themselves. Why is cash the best way to help? Or in your view, is cash the best way to get help and humanitarian aid to people affected by disasters?
I think it is. I think cash or delivering cash through the mobile phone, obviously, if the network is working. I think it's by far the best way, because you can reach many more people. You're giving a degree of agency to people to look after themselves in what is clearly an extreme situation. So yes, I do think cash is king in this type of environment, or potentially mobile money if the network is working.
We've mentioned Turkey. That was an earthquake. Same thing that happened to Morocco as well. The impact on Morocco's economy, and they have to deal with, I guess, the aftermath of the aftershocks and so on and so forth, and then the cost of this earthquake, billions of dollars. How much further damage you think would the earthquake in Morocco do to their economy? Although keeping in mind, I think it was in the mountainous regions where this happened. But what's your take?
So, yes, you're right. It was in the sort of Atlas Mountains. Just to give you some context, Morocco, GDP about $150 billion, 3x times Libya. A strong economy. Obviously, people know Morocco for tourism. It's a very popular destination. But also, Morocco has become kind of a transshipment point between Europe and Asia. They've invested heavily in their ports. They've got some very 21st century ports. They're big in car manufacturing, for example, as well. So it's a very dynamic economy, mining. So I think, look, this is a setback. Obviously, it was in a remote part of the country, but I suspect there'll be plenty of support for Morocco in this situation, and that hopefully they'll get back on track reasonably quickly. Morocco is one of the most promising economies on the continent and has shown high alpha in terms of performance. You haven't had that boom bust type situation we find in many other parts of sub-Saharan Africa. So I expect them to bounce back. Again, tragic, unfortunate. I commiserate with them. But it is a relatively robust economy.
And speaking of bouncing back and moving forward, Morocco apparently will still be hosting the IMF and World Bank meetings in October as planned. What's your take on that? I mean, as far as them moving forward with that.
So I think, my first takeaway is that it's the IMF and World Bank. It's an important signaling effect, signaling to Africa that Morocco is considered at the forefront of African development. I expect it to go forward. The IMF and World Bank are committed to the country. They've got programs in place at the moment. And I think it's important that this conference goes forward and sends the message that Morocco's back on track and open for business.
So that being said, I guess what would be your economic, investment outlook rather for both Libya and Morocco? Are there two different outlooks there?
Very different outlooks. I think, look, Libya's got this significant tailwind of oil prices, and I do think oil prices will go higher and stick there for far longer than most analysts are predicting. I think, we've had a major macroeconomic development where both Putin and Mohammed bin Salman have basically taken control of the oil price. And bear in mind, the Americans have controlled that oil price since the days of the petrodollar and the USS Quincy. So pretty big news, in my opinion. I think that will underpin the Libyan recovery. But the problem in Libya, of course, is it's a very disjointed government. But it's a small economy. If they get back on track, you'll see some progress. Morocco, a completely different beast, going significantly up the value addition ladder, as I said, big in car manufacturing now, mining, the ports, transportation. They spent money wisely, unlike some of our other countries. They got the fast train. They've got all kinds of interesting infrastructure in place. So I'm bullish on Morocco, and a strong banking sector as well to support growth going forward. So look, while it's not going to do double-digit growth in Morocco, you're going to get numbers above 3.5, closer to 5% if everything goes right. So I think this is a blip for Morocco, and they'll be back on track reasonably quickly.
Always a pleasure speaking about the African continent and the various economies with you, Sir Ali Khan Satchu, founder, CEO, Rich Management. Thank you so much for your time.